What I really need from my law firm is someone who can provide my staff training so we actually can stay out of trouble.
I really just want somebody who's going to aggressively fight for me in court. Is that too much to ask?
When you have property management problems, we have your solutions. This is the Zona Law Group podcast with the experienced attorneys from Zona Law.
Thank you very much, and welcome back to the Zona Law podcast. I am Mark Zinman.
And I'm Chris Welch.
Thank you guys so much for being here, and I don't think in my entire life I would ever say this, but please subscribe. It helps us figure out where we're going and also how many people are watching. But yeah, as an attorney, that sounds like a ridiculous thing to say to somebody. All right, we are here today. We are excited. Obviously, the CDC moratorium was found unconstitutional 6 weeks ago, and we actually intentionally waited this long to do a podcast to come back and talk about it so we'd have a better idea of really what's going on. I didn't want to rush to analyze what's going on in the courts without having the facts so that we can actually really tell our clients what we're seeing. So here we are, 6-7 weeks out. The eviction moratorium was found unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. They still have the case to litigate, but it's not in force right now. So the question that everyone has said is that after 18 months of hearing this, was there an eviction tsunami?
No, that has not been what we have seen. As you just said, Mark, we've been hearing from all the pundits, everybody thinking, oh, this had to be in effect to avoid the tsunami of evictions that we're going to see. But in reality, we have seen some uptick of evictions, obviously, because there's no longer the moratorium preventing them. But there's been no tsunami or tidal wave or any of those other terms.
Yeah, and it's not even to me, it's a black or white issue. There never was a tsunami of evictions that came once the moratorium expired. And I think that is actually what we've been saying for months. Throughout this entire thing, we've tried to explain that our client's business is not to do an eviction. Like, it doesn't help to evict a resident and to deal with the turn cost, to deal with trying to find a new resident. If they can keep a resident on a payment plan or work something out, get rental assistance, that's so much better. I mean, are you talking to clients about rental assistance, about what they're getting from the agencies?
Yes, that is something that we're seeing. A lot of clients are reaching out and saying, we haven't had any rental assistance come through, but we do want to continue to work with these tenants if we can. And frankly, there has been an uptick in rental assistance being received for tenants so long as they are willing to go through the process. And if landlords are willing to work with them, we've been suggesting that they do, and I know that a lot of the courts are doing that as well.
Yeah, and that's a good point. We actually suggested as well, even as the clients are going through the court process, because what we found from the agencies is actually that if a landlord goes through, gets a judgment, the agencies are able to expedite the process to get the rental assistance out faster to keep the resident in there, which is great for the landlord. It's great for the resident. And most of our clients are vacating those judgments because the rental assistance agreement requires it as well. So it literally makes everybody whole, and the system works that way. So we're truly pushing our clients as much as they can, even if the resident is several months delinquent and they're filing to, the landlord wants to get their rights, work with them. Get the rental assistance. Hopefully it'll come in so that the resident can stay. But what happens if the resident is required to vacate, does leave? What can you do about the rental assistance at that point?
Well, it's pretty interesting. We've actually just received some new information related to that the rental assistance can be utilized to go towards a judgment and pay off that judgment amount, which like you just said, Mark, is good for everybody involved. Even if the tenant does have to end up vacating, they don't want that judgment on their record. That can hurt them trying to get their next residence or just their credit score and everything that way. But when that judgment is paid off, the rental assistance funds can be used to assist them in removing the judgment and help them in all those aspects.
Yeah, and I think it's great that the government's come out with that position, because originally a lot of tenant advocates were saying, well, no, if the resident's gone, we don't want the funds to go to the last landlord. But the reality is, if the tenant has a judgment against them, they owe the money. The purpose is to make the landlords whole and to satisfy the debts that the resident owes. So if they can pay off the judgment, it makes it easier for the tenant moving forward. It makes the landlord whole. And it really is a great outcome for both. So even if the tenant is vacating, we still suggest landlords reach out to your tenants, talk to them, have them apply, because obviously in Arizona, the tenant has to sign off on it. And then you can go through that process even if they're gone, which is great. I think I'd come up with the idea a couple of days ago, almost off the top of my head, is that I think it's a good idea even for landlords to potentially put a note to tenants in the security deposit accounting saying like, hey, if we had a judgment against you or if you owe delinquent rents, you may be able still to get rental assistance. So contact us, work with us so that they don't just not talk to each other, right? Communication's big.
Yeah.
So I think you said, undoubtedly there's no tsunami of evictions, which is excellent. Now what we've seen tenant advocates argue in the newspaper, they seem to acknowledge that there's no tsunami. Now they're just saying that there's an increase. I saw an article, I think it was this week, saying there was a doubling of evictions. So there is an uptick in evictions, correct?
Yes, that is. But frankly, that was inevitable. There was the moratorium on the evictions that prevented landlords from moving forward and getting possession back. And frankly, when a tenant is delinquent, is unable to come back in with full payment, the right for that eviction obviously remains.
Are they at, where are we compared to where we were before the pandemic?
We're still well below pre-pandemic levels. Again, there's been no tsunami. There's been no huge uptick. Where we are seeing, the eviction levels are just still way down.
Yeah, because what we had is the government effectively suppressed what was going on in business, and so now we don't have a tsunami. Yes, evictions are going up because a number of residents simply ghosted their landlord, didn't pay for months. I mean, I saw a case yesterday where a tenant owed over $30,000 in an apartment. I mean, it's just unbelievable, staggering numbers. So evictions have gone back up, but they're significantly low compared to pre-pandemic levels. And so to me, that tells me that landlords are still working with residents.
Yeah, and that's definitely the information that I'm seeing as well. The landlords are still continuing to work with tenants, and this is true even after a judgment is received. We see a lot of landlords that are still willing to work, trying to get the rental assistance, delaying the writs of restitution, which are the actual eviction orders, and they're still trying to work with tenants to avoid their actual removal if at all possible.
No, it's a great point because it is true. The article was talking about the filing doubling. But the reality is we know is if residents are staying, getting rental assistance and pay off landlords, I'd be curious to know because the actual writs where somebody is removed are probably even further below than the fact that we are pre-pandemic as well. I mean, the numbers are significantly low because, as we've seen, our clients are working with those residents that are working with them. And that's the biggest thing. Going to those ones that are actually in court, though, where the landlord is proceeding, what are you seeing in court right now? Has everything gone back to normal? Things changed? Where are we?
Things are more normal, I would say, than they have been over the last 18 months. But there obviously are still significant changes that we're experiencing and still trying to navigate. I think some of the biggest changes relate to the state's administrative orders, which are still in place, which require additional information from landlords in order to file a complaint. That requirement is still ongoing. Yeah,
our clients will obviously know the different AO forms that we've had them sign. It started with like a paragraph and a checkbox, and now we've got like a full page of questions they have to answer. And what that comes from is the Supreme Court telling us what needs to go in our complaints and us obviously requiring the facts from our clients to fill that in. And what are you seeing in courts with the virtual court? Because this is, I mean, it never existed before the pandemic. They rolled it out temporarily. We obviously, there's a statute that was passed to now allow virtual court to continue. So how's that working out?
Yeah, so most of the courts have now converted to a video system through Zoom or Microsoft Teams or something. And really what it's doing is it has increased everyone's access to the courts. We're seeing more tenants are appearing,
which is good.
Yeah, in reality is a good thing. They can understand the process better and represent themselves. But what that does do is it does slow down the court process. Pre-pandemic, who knows how many people actually drove to the courthouse and appeared. Obviously wasn't a huge percentage of tenants, and that, like I said, has gone up. But what that also allows is if a landlord needs to appear as a witness, or a police officer needs to appear as a necessary witness, or they're all allowed to appear virtually as well, which in reality allows for more flexibility there as well.
Yeah, I think it's great for both sides. The landlords, their witnesses, the other residents that may be affected by non-compliance issues, and the police. We've had numerous police that are able to show up now for different criminal where they wouldn't show up before just because they had to drive, take time off. And on the resident side, we think there's that same benefit is we've seen a significant increase in the amount of residents that show up. And to me, I applaud that. I think it's great. If the residents can show up, understand what's going on, bring forth any legal defense they have, I support that wholeheartedly. It's not about making the system one-sided. It's literally to be able to a benefit to both sides. So I think that's great. But as you know, it does slow the cases down. I would expect probably over time will be more trials as well, but we haven't yet seen that long enough. Again, for our viewers, you got to remember, as attorneys, we'd love to report you. We'd kind of update you every day if we could, but we'd really like to have a better idea of how things are working before we just jump on a podcast and state things. So I think I agree with you. The two biggest changes are complaints are getting longer, and the virtual court is very different, so it is going a little slower, but the laws themselves are kicking back into normal. So as we see more changes, we will definitely update you, keep you aware of what's going on in the courts. Until the next time, we'll see you on the Zona Law Podcast.
Thanks.